The Carolina sun beat down on Fort Bragg's front gate as Captain Maya Chun presented her orders to the guard. The specialist scanned her identification twice before waving her through with a nod that seemed more confused than welcoming. She drove past the main administrative complex toward the advanced marksmanship training facility, noting the clusters of male snipers who paused their conversations to watch her vehicle pass. The processing center smelled of gun oil and old coffee. 3 sergeants stood near the equipment cages, their discussion falling silent when she entered. Maya set her deployment bag down and approached the desk where a corporal reviewed her paperwork with slow deliberation. Staff Sergeant Derek Mason emerged from his office, file folder in hand. He glanced at the name on the cover, then at Maya, then back at the folder. His expression shifted through calculation before settling into something resembling polite dismissal. Mason opened the folder, but read only the first page, his finger tracing across her basic qualification from 6 years earlier. He closed it after 30 seconds. The range instructor turned to his clerk. Put her with the beginners on the 300-meter course. She can prove herself there first. Maya straightened. Sir, my orders specify advanced training. I have expert marksman qualification and 5 combat deployments. Mason set the folder on the counter without reopening it. Everyone here has qualifications, Captain. We start with fundamentals to ensure proper integration with the team. The advanced course requires certain readiness that takes time to develop. The clerk handed Maya a weapon card for the basic range. Mason added that she should report to the equipment room in 10 minutes, then return to his office. Through the window, Maya watched him speak with another instructor, both men shaking their heads. The equipment room attendant issued her a rifle that had seen better years. The stock was worn smooth, the scope mounted slightly off-center. Maya checked the action and found it functional despite its age. Outside, she could hear the crack of shots from the advanced range where students engaged targets at 1,500 meters. Her assigned station sat 300 meters from a row of stationary bullseyes. She completed the basic qualification course in 12 minutes. Every round found center mass. The range safety officer marked her scorecard with perfect 10s down the column, then radioed Mason that the new captain had finished. Maya watched through her scope as Mason observed from the tower, his binoculars trained on her position. He lowered them after a moment and turned away. The afternoon assignment came through the clerk. Mason needed someone to clean weapons in the armory while the advanced students continued their training. Maya spent 3 hours disassembling rifles and running patches through barrels. Another instructor entered to retrieve ammunition, commenting to the supply sergeant that women lacked the constitution for the real challenges of advanced marksmanship. The physical demands and mental pressure separated those who could perform from those who thought they could. Maya focused on her work, each weapon cleaned to specifications. Through the armory window, she observed the advanced shooters engaging targets at distances that challenged even experienced snipers. She wondered if anyone else here knew what it felt like to be constantly doubted, constantly having to prove themselves in their own workplace. The question hung in her mind like the heat shimmer over the desert range. By evening formation, she had been assigned to supply inventory for the following day. No mention of the advanced course appeared on her schedule. Mason briefed the advanced students on their next training evolution while Maya stood with 2 privates recently arrived from basic training. The briefing covered wind reading techniques and ballistic calculations for extreme distances, skills she had applied dozens of times in combat situations overseas. After formation dismissed, Maya returned to her temporary quarters. Her deployment bag contained 5 years of performance evaluations, each marking her as among the top snipers in her previous units. Commendations described eliminations at distances that exceeded what most shooters attempted. One classified citation referenced a 2,400-meter shot that saved a pinned-down squad. None of this information had made it past the first page Mason bothered to read. She unpacked her gear with methodical precision, hanging uniforms and organizing equipment. The facility would test her patience as much as her skill. Tomorrow would bring more basic tasks and more dismissal. But Maya had learned long ago that capability eventually spoke louder than assumption. The targets downrange did not care about bias. They only recorded hits or misses. Everything else was noise. The week passed in a blur of menial assignments. Maya sorted ammunition in the supply room, ran equipment between buildings, and maintained weapons that other shooters would fire. Each morning she checked the training roster posted outside Mason's office, finding her name absent from the advanced course listings. When she asked the clerk about the schedule, he mentioned something about the course being full and suggested she check again next month. Lieutenant Colonel James Rivera arrived on Thursday for his quarterly inspection tour. His vehicle pulled up to the administrative building precisely at 0900, and he spent the first hour reviewing facility maintenance reports. By 10:30, he had moved to the training documentation, spreading folders across the conference table while Mason stood nearby, explaining the current cycle's progress. Rivera pulled one file from the stack. This captain here shows expert marksman qualification from a previous unit and multiple deployment ribbons. Why is she listed under basic training tasks? Mason shifted his weight. She needs more preparation before moving to the advanced course, sir. We want to ensure she's ready for the team dynamics and the pressure of extreme distance shooting. Rivera opened the file further, his finger tracing down the page. Her record shows 15 confirmed eliminations. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 3 in Iraq. What preparation does someone with this background need for a training course? The range instructor explained that paper qualifications did not always translate to the facility's specific standards. Team cohesion mattered as much as individual skill, and rushing someone into the advanced group could disrupt the established rhythm. Better to let her acclimate properly than force integration before everyone was comfortable. Rivera closed the file and set it aside. He continued through the rest of the inspection, noting equipment status and training completion rates. But twice more he returned to Maya's folder, reading sections Mason had not mentioned. By noon, the lieutenant colonel had seen enough. The 2 officers walked to the intermediate range, where students engaged targets at 800 meters. Rivera watched the shooters for several minutes before speaking. I want to see Captain Chin demonstrate her capability. Set up a trial on this range. Today, Mason began to object about scheduling conflicts, but Rivera cut him short. Today, Staff Sergeant. Let's see what she can actually do. Maya received the summons at 1300 hours. She reported to the intermediate range, where a target array had been positioned at 800 meters. Mason handed her a rifle and explained the wind conditions with clipped efficiency. 10 shots. Show us what you learned in basic training. She settled into position, checking the scope and testing the trigger pull. The wind flags indicated a quartering breeze from the left, shifting between 5 and 8 miles per hour. Maya made her calculations and fired the first round. The spotter called center mass. She adjusted slightly and fired again. Another center hit. 8 more rounds followed in steady succession. The target board showed 10 impacts clustered within a handspan of each other, all in the high-value zone. Rivera nodded and marked something on his clipboard. Mason stood with his arms crossed, watching through binoculars. The lieutenant colonel lowered his clipboard. That's solid shooting for 800 meters in variable wind. Mason spoke before Maya could respond. It's decent for intermediate distances, sir. The advanced course works at 1500 meters and beyond. Different challenge entirely. Rivera turned to the range instructor. Nevertheless, she's clearly qualified for more than equipment maintenance. Move her to the advanced course starting Monday. Mason agreed, though his jaw tightened as he spoke. The paperwork will be processed. However, the next advanced cycle did not begin for another month, and joining mid-cycle would put her behind the other students. Better to start fresh when the new group formed in 4 weeks. Rivera studied Mason for a long moment. 4 weeks seems excessive for administrative processing. The range instructor explained that the advanced course followed a specific progression, with each week building on previous skills. Inserting someone mid-cycle created gaps in their foundation that could cause problems later. The next full cycle started in late October. He would ensure Captain Chun was included in that roster. After Rivera departed, Mason returned to his office and updated the training schedule. Maya's name appeared on the November course listing, more than a month away. He filed the paperwork and locked his desk. That evening, Maya found the updated roster posted outside the administrative building. November 7th, 6 weeks from now. She photographed the notice with her phone and returned to her quarters. The following morning brought another week of supply tasks. Mason assigned her to inventory the ammunition storage facility, a job that required checking lot numbers against database records. She spent 2 days in the climate-controlled bunker, counting cases and recording serial numbers. On the third day, an advanced student named Collins stopped by the bunker to retrieve match-grade ammunition for his training session. He noticed Maya's rank insignia and expert marksman badge. "You're qualified for the advanced course. Why are you doing inventory?" Maya continued her count without looking up. "Apparently, I need more preparation time." Collins loaded his ammunition case. Mason runs a tight ship. He has specific ideas about who fits the program. After he left, Maya completed the inventory and submitted her report. The supply sergeant reviewed her work and commented that it was the most accurate count they had received in 2 years. Every number matched, every lot properly documented. She possessed the kind of attention to detail that made the difference in precision shooting. Maya thanked him and requested her next assignment. The sergeant checked his clipboard. Mason wanted the range equipment shed organized. All the spotting scopes needed cleaning and the tripods required inspection. Probably take the rest of the week. She walked to the equipment shed as the advanced students headed to the long-range facility. Their rifles were pristine, their gear fitted to exact specifications. They moved with the confidence of people who knew they belonged. Maya opened the shed and began sorting through decades of accumulated equipment, separating functional items from those needing repair. The week ended with her name still listed for November. 6 weeks away. 42 days of cleaning, counting, and waiting. She maintained her own training regimen in her off hours, running the facility's perimeter and practicing dry fire drills in her quarters. The fundamentals remained sharp even without range time. Mason rarely spoke to her directly now. Instructions came through the clerk or the supply sergeant. The range instructor focused his attention on the advanced students, coaching them through complex calculations and environmental reading. Maya watched from a distance when her tasks brought her near the ranges, observing techniques she had learned years ago in far more demanding circumstances. November remained distant on the calendar. The targets waited at 1,500 meters and beyond. Eventually, she would get her chance to prove what Mason should have seen from the beginning. Until then, the work continued. The helicopter appeared over the tree line at 0800 on a Tuesday morning. The distinct sound of rotor blades carried across the facility as General Patricia Hawkins arrived for her annual review. 2 stars gleamed on her collar as she stepped onto the pad, her aide following with a briefcase full of assessment documents. Rivera met her at the landing zone and escorted her to the command building. They spent the first hour reviewing facility statistics, training completion rates, and equipment readiness reports. Hawkins asked pointed questions about instructor qualification levels and student advancement metrics. Everything appeared standard until Rivera mentioned the assignment situation with their newest sniper. The general set down her coffee. "What situation?" Rivera explained the circumstances carefully. A highly qualified captain with multiple combat deployments had been restricted to basic tasks for 6 weeks. Expert marksman rating. 15 confirmed eliminations. Currently scheduled to start advanced training in November despite arriving in September. Hawkins leaned back at her chair. "I want to observe the training ranges. Show me what you're working with here." They drove to the long-range facility where the advanced course was in session. 15 students occupied firing positions at the 1,500-meter line. Mason supervised from the tower, calling wind adjustments and coaching students through their calculations. The targets showed a mix of hits and misses, with 6 out of 10 being the average score. The general climbed the observation tower and stood beside Mason. "How are the conditions today?" The range instructor gestured toward the flags scattered across the range. Variable winds between 7 and 12 miles per hour, ma'am, gusting occasionally to 15. Makes the 1,500-meter shots challenging even for our advanced students. Hawkins watched through binoculars as another student fired. The round impacted low and left of the target. She lowered the binoculars and scanned the facility. I notice you have the extreme range set up beyond this. The 3,000-meter course. Mason nodded. Yes, ma'am. That range hasn't been used for actual qualification in about 18 months. We maintain it for equipment testing mostly. The general's interest sharpened. What's the current facility record at that distance? Mason pulled up the range logbook on his tablet. 2650 meters, ma'am. Set 3 years ago by a Marine Corps instructor who was here for an exchange program. Very few people ever attempt the 3,000-meter targets. Hawkins studied the distant range where tiny steel plates barely visible even with magnification waited in the afternoon heat. I've seen the statistics on extreme distance shooting. Carlos Hathcock made his famous shot at 2,500 yards. Chris Kyle had confirmed kills past 2,000 meters. But 3,000 meters remains exceptionally rare. The range instructor agreed. Only legends hit that far, ma'am. Even with modern equipment, the ballistics become incredibly complex. You're dealing with significant bullet drop, wind drift across multiple zones, spin drift, even the Coriolis effect starts to matter. Most shooters never attempt it because the success rate is so low. Mason explained that the facility kept the extreme range operational mainly for testing new ammunition and optics. Occasionally, they would run demonstrations for visiting dignitaries, but actual qualification attempts were unusual. The last time they had set up targets for a serious record attempt was over a year ago, and even their best instructors had failed to connect consistently. Hawkins considered this while watching the advanced students complete their 1,500-meter course. The general turned to Rivera. When does Captain Shun start her advanced training? Rivera checked his notes. November's event, ma'am. Another 3 weeks. The general's expression showed calculation. 3 weeks seems like a long time for someone with her background. Where is she now? Rivera explained that she was currently assigned to range maintenance tasks. Mason added that they wanted to ensure proper team integration and complete preparation before moving her to the advanced course. The program worked best when students started together at the beginning of a training cycle. Hawkins descended from the tower and walked along the firing line, observing each student's technique. Most showed solid fundamentals, but nothing exceptional. She noted their equipment, their positioning, their focus. All competent, none extraordinary. The general returned to where Rivera and Mason stood. I want to test the extreme range this afternoon. Let's see if modern training methods and equipment have improved our capability at 3,000 meters. Select your best shooters and set up the targets. Mason's surprise flickered briefly. Ma'am, we can certainly arrange that. It will take about an hour to position the target array and set up the spotting equipment. Hawkins checked her watch. That's fine. I have meetings until 1300 anyway. Set it up for 1400 hours. I want to see what this facility's top performers can do at legendary distances. The equipment team mobilized immediately after the general departed for her next briefing. They drove to the extreme range and began placing targets at 3,000 meters, using laser rangefinders and GPS equipment to ensure precise measurement. 12 steel plates were positioned across a 100-meter spread, each one barely visible even through powerful spotting scopes. Wind sensors were installed at 500-meter intervals along the range. Flags were checked and replaced where needed. The observation tower was equipped with high-powered optics and communication equipment. Everything had to be perfect for the general's test. Mason selected his 4 best students for the attempt. Sergeant Collins had the most experience with extreme distances. Staff Sergeant Park had recently qualified at 2,000 meters with exceptional accuracy. Sergeant First Class Williams was the top student in the current advanced course. Master Sergeant Thompson was an instructor with 15 years of experience. If anyone could reach 3,000 meters, these 4 could. By 1330 hours, the range was ready. The targets stood waiting in the distance, heat shimmer, making them dance and blur. The selected shooters prepared their equipment and reviewed their ballistic data. Mason briefed them on the wind conditions and provided his assessment of the best holds and adjustments. Maya appeared at the range entrance at 13:45. She was scheduled to deliver cleaned spotting scopes to the equipment room and had arrived just as the preparations were completing. She set down her equipment case and observed the setup with professional interest. Mason noticed her, but said nothing. The general's test would begin in 15 minutes, and his focus remained on preparing his shooters for the legendary distance that had defeated so many before them. 3,000 meters. The range that separated competent snipers from the truly exceptional. The distance that made legends. General Hawkins returned to the extreme range at precisely 1400 hours. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the desert terrain as she climbed the observation tower where Rivera and Mason waited with the spotting equipment. 3,000 meters downrange, the steel targets reflected bright points of light that flickered in the heat shimmer. The first shooter, Sergeant Collins, settled into position with methodical precision. He had 8 years of sniper experience and multiple combat deployments. His spotter called the wind conditions while Collins adjusted his scope and checked his ballistic calculator. The wind flag showed gusts shifting between 8 and 14 miles per hour from the southwest. Collins fired his first shot. The round cracked downrange and disappeared into the distance. The spotters tracked with their optics, searching for impact. After 5 seconds, one spotter called a miss low and right at approximately 2,700 meters. Collins adjusted his elevation and windage, then fired again. Another miss, this time falling short at 2,800. 6 more shots followed over the next 4 minutes. Collins managed to connect with the target at 2,800 meters twice, but nothing reached the 3,000-meter mark. He fired his 10th round and cleared his weapon, frustration evident in the set of his shoulders. Staff Sergeant Park took position next. She was known for her mathematical precision and had recently set a facility record at 2,000 meters. Her spotter provided wind calls while Park ran calculations on her ballistic computer. The numbers looked good on paper, but 3,000 meters defied simple mathematics. Park's first 5 shots fell short, the rounds losing energy before reaching the target line. She adjusted her elevation to maximum and tried again. The 6th shot impacted at 2,900 meters. The 7th missed entirely. She fired her remaining 3 rounds with careful deliberation, but none connected at the extreme distance. Park cleared her weapon and stepped back, shaking her head. Sergeant First Class Williams approached the firing line with quiet confidence. He was the top student in the current course and had been studying extreme distance ballistics for months. Williams took extra time with his preparation, checking every variable twice before settling into his final position. His first shot showed promise, impacting at 2,900 meters. The spotters called it close. Williams made a minor adjustment and fired again. 2,950. Closer. The third shot reached 3,000 meters, but missed left by 2 feet. Williams compensated and fired his 4th round. Miss right. The remaining 6 shots clustered around the 3,000-meter line, but failed to connect with steel. 1 round impacted at 2,900. The others scattered in the wind. Master Sergeant Thompson was the final shooter. He had 15 years of instructor experience and had trained hundreds of snipers. Thompson had attempted the 3,000-meter shot twice before in his career and understood its difficulty. He set up with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this many times. Thompson's shots were consistent but unsuccessful. Each round reached the approximate distance, and his windage calls were nearly perfect, but the combination of bullet drop and environmental factors prevented connection. 10 shots produced 10 misses, though several came within feet of the targets. He cleared his weapon and stood, offering no excuses. Hawkins lowered her binoculars and consulted her notes. 13 total attempts before the general's arrival, during equipment calibration. 26 shots during her observation. All 4 shooters were experienced and skilled. None could consistently reach 3,000 meters. The general turned to Mason. Looks like legendary status is still intact. 3,000 meters remains as difficult as the record suggests. Mason agreed. It's an exceptionally challenging distance, ma'am. Even our most experienced shooters struggle with the variables at that range. The conditions have to be nearly perfect, and even then success is rare. The general prepared to descend from the tower. Rivera glanced at his watch and began gathering his equipment. The demonstration had provided valuable data about current capability limitations. The extreme range would return to its usual state of disuse, waiting for the next attempt months or years in the future. Maya stood near the equipment table where she had been observing the attempts. She stepped forward before the group could leave. Request permission to attempt the qualification, ma'am. Mason turned sharply. Captain, this is a demonstration for senior leadership. The selected shooters were chosen based on their advanced course performance. Maya kept her attention on the general. Ma'am, I'm qualified on this weapon system and familiar with extreme distance calculations. I request an opportunity to attempt the course. Hawkins studied Maya with renewed interest. The general had read enough of the file to know about the deployment record and the assignment controversy. This captain had been restricted to maintenance tasks for 6 weeks despite impressive credentials. Something about her confidence suggested this was more than empty bravado. Mason objected immediately. General, we've already completed the demonstration. Captain Chen hasn't been through her advanced course yet. Letting her attempt this would be a waste of ammunition and your time. She's scheduled for training in November when she's properly prepared. The general held up her hand. How much ammunition do we have remaining? The range safety officer checked the supply. 1 magazine, ma'am. 10 rounds. Hawkins looked at Maya, then at Mason, then back at Maya. The general's expression showed calculation mixed with curiosity. You understand that 4 experienced shooters just failed at this distance. What makes you think you can succeed where they could not? Maya's response was simple and direct. Because I've done it before, ma'am. Multiple times. In combat situations where the conditions were worse and the stakes were higher. Mason started to interrupt, but Hawkins stopped him with a gesture. The general descended from the tower and walked to where Maya stood. Up close, Hawkins could see the deployment patches on Maya's uniform, the expert marksman badge, the quiet certainty in her eyes that came from proven capability rather than assumed competence. You have 1 magazine, 10 rounds. Show me what you can do. Maya moved to the firing line and accepted the rifle from the range safety officer. She checked the weapon with practiced efficiency, examining the scope alignment and testing the trigger pull. The bolts cycled smoothly. The magazine seated with a solid click. Mason watched from the tower, his jaw tight. Rivera stood beside him, notepad ready. The other shooters gathered near the observation area, curious about what would happen next. Collins whispered something to Park about this being embarrassing when she missed all 10 shots. Maya settled into position and began her preparation. She studied the wind flags from 3,000 meters all the way back to her position, noting the patterns and variations. The mirage shimmered across the desert floor, creating visible heat bands that indicated wind direction and intensity. She checked the angle of the sun and calculated the effect on her scope's optics. 2 full minutes passed while she observed and calculated. Mason shifted impatiently in the tower. Hawkins remained perfectly still, watching with the focus of someone who recognized preparation when she saw it. Maya's breathing slowed to a steady rhythm as she made final adjustments to her scope and body position. The range fell silent as her finger moved to the trigger. Maya's first shot broke the silence with a sharp crack that echoed across the desert range. The bullet traced an invisible arc through the afternoon air, crossing 3,000 meters in just under 4 seconds. Every spotter in the observation tower tracked its path through their optics, searching for impact. The call came simultaneously from 3 different spotters. Hit at 2850. Mason leaned forward, his binoculars locked on the target array. That's still 200 meters short of the actual qualification distance. Maya absorbed the information without visible reaction. She had anticipated the bullet drop based on the wind pattern she observed, and the impact point confirmed her initial calculations were close but required adjustment. Her first shot had been a ranging round, providing data the equipment could not. She made a minute adjustment to her scope, turning the elevation dial 3 clicks. The windage needed correction as well, a subtle shift to account for the gusting crosswind that was stronger at distance than the flags indicated at her position. Maya settled back into her shooting position and controlled her breathing to the same steady rhythm. The second shot followed 20 seconds later. The round flew downrange and connected with steel at 2,950 meters. The distinctive ring of bullet on metal carried faintly back to the firing line. The spotters confirmed the hit. Park whispered to Collins, "She's walking it in. That's solid technique." Mason's expression shifted from dismissive to attentive. 2 good hits, but still not at 3,000. The targets at the extreme distance remained untouched. Maya's third adjustment was smaller than the previous 2. She had the range now, and the wind pattern was clear in her mind. The variables that had defeated the other shooters were resolving into predictable patterns. She could see the solution in the way the mirage bent, in the rhythm of the flag movements, in the slight increase in wind speed every 18 seconds as gusts moved across the range. Her third shot flew true. The bullet covered 3,000 meters and struck the center target with a clear metallic ring that silenced every conversation on the range. The impact was unmistakable even without the spotters confirming it. 3,000 meters. Dead center. The observation tower erupted with reactions. 2 of the spotters exchanged glances of disbelief. Rivera marked something on his clipboard with decisive strokes. Hawkins stood from her chair, her binoculars still trained on the distant target. Mason's voice cut through the noise. "Lucky shot." Wind probably shifted in her favor at just the right moment. Maya heard the comment through her ear protection, but did not respond. She chambered another round and returned to her shooting position. The wind had not shifted. The conditions remained consistent with her calculations. She had 7 rounds remaining, and every intention of proving the shot was repeatable. The fourth shot required no adjustment. Maya applied the same hold, the same breathing pattern, the same trigger squeeze. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder, and the bullet arced downrange. 4 seconds later, steel rang at 3,000 meters. The spotters called it without hesitation. Center mass impact, same target as before. Collins stared through his spotting scope. That's not luck. That's skill. Maya's 5th shot connected 10 seconds later. 3 consecutive hits at 3,000 meters, a distance that minutes before had seemed nearly impossible for even the facility's best shooters. The achievement was undeniable now. This was not environmental chance or equipment advantage. This was precision shooting at a level the facility had never witnessed. Mason descended from the tower without speaking. His boots hit the ground hard as he approached the firing line, his face displaying calculation rather than anger. Rivera followed, his clipboard filled with observations and measurements. Hawkins remained in the tower, her attention locked on Maya's position. The 6th shot missed left by 3 feet. Maya had anticipated a wind gust that arrived half a second late, throwing off her timing. She adjusted and fired again. Hit. The 7th round connected with steel at 3,000 meters, adding another impact to the target that was now accumulating damage from repeated strikes. Park approached the range safety officer. "Has anyone ever hit 3,000 meters 4 times in a single string?" The safety officer checked his historical records on his tablet. "Not at this facility. The record is 1 hit out of 10 attempts. She's at 4 hits out of 7 shots." Maya fired her 8th round. The bullet reached distance, but missed right as another wind gust pushed it off course. She compensated immediately and chambered her 9th round. The sight picture was perfect. The wind had returned to its base pattern. She squeezed the trigger with the same smooth pressure she had applied 8 times before. Hit. 5 confirmed impacts at 3,000 meters. Hawkins descended from the tower and walked to where Mason stood. The general's expression showed professional assessment rather than surprise. She had read enough of Maya's file to suspect this outcome was possible, but witnessing it removed all doubt. Staff Sergeant Mason, has this captain been receiving ammunition for personal practice during her time here? Mason shook his head. No, ma'am. She's been assigned to maintenance and supply duties. No range time since her initial basic qualification 6 weeks ago. The general watched Maya prepare for her final shot. So she hasn't fired a weapon at this facility since September, yet she's hitting a target that defeated 4 of your advanced shooters. What does that tell you? Mason had no response that would not reveal the depth of his misjudgment. He stood silent while Maya fired her 10th and final round. The bullet connected with the 3,000-meter target for the 6th time, the impact clearly visible even at extreme distance. Maya cleared her weapon and stood. She removed her ear protection and turned to face the observation group. Her expression showed neither satisfaction nor vindication, just the calm professionalism of someone who had completed an assigned task to standard. Hawkins approached the firing line. 6 hits out of 10 at 3,000 meters. What's your background with extreme distance shooting, Captain? Maya provided the information without embellishment. 2 tours in Afghanistan provided multiple opportunities for extreme distance engagements. Mountainous terrain required shots regularly exceeding 2,000 meters. The longest confirmed elimination was 2,400 meters against an enemy sniper who had pinned down a squad for 6 hours. The general nodded. And you've been cleaning equipment for 6 weeks instead of training at your actual capability level. Yes, ma'am. Rivera stepped forward with his clipboard. General, I recommend we verify the equipment and targets to ensure accurate measurement. This performance is extraordinary and should be properly documented. Hawkins agreed. Send a range crew downrange to confirm the target impacts and distances. I want photographs and laser measurements. This may be a new facility record. Mason stood apart from the group, his confident dismissal replaced by recognition that he had fundamentally misjudged the situation. The captain he had relegated to basic tasks had just demonstrated capability that exceeded everyone at the facility, including the instructors. The implications of that misjudgment were beginning to crystallize. Maya handed her rifle to the range safety officer and waited while the equipment team mobilized to verify her shots. The afternoon sun continued its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the range where 6 impact points at 3,000 meters would soon be measured, photographed, and recorded. The targets that 4 expert shooters could not reach consistently now bore the evidence of what happened when skill met opportunity instead of assumption. The range crew reached the target array within 15 minutes, their vehicle kicking up dust as it traversed the 3,000-meter distance. 2 equipment specialists deployed laser rangefinders and GPS units to verify the exact measurements. The senior technician photographed each impact point with a digital camera equipped with macro lens capability, capturing the deformation patterns where Maya's bullets had struck steel. The first measurement confirmed 3,000.0 meters from firing line to target center. The GPS coordinates matched the range documentation exactly. No error. No aproximación. The distance was precisely what the facility claimed for its extreme range qualification. The technician counted the impact points on the primary target. 6 distinct strikes, all within an 18-inch radius. The clustering demonstrated consistency that went beyond luck or favorable conditions. He photographed the damage pattern from multiple angles, then moved to check the other targets in the array. 2 additional impacts appeared on adjacent targets at 2,850 and 2,950 meters, confirming the ranging shots Maya had fired during her initial adjustments. Back at the observation tower, Rivera requested Maya's complete military file from the personnel office. The clerk transmitted the digital version to his tablet within minutes. Rivera opened it and began reading past the first page that Mason had reviewed 6 weeks earlier. The second page detailed her advanced sniper school completion with honors. Third page showed deployment orders to a specialized reconnaissance unit. Fourth page listed combat action reports from Afghanistan's Khyber province. Fifth page contained classified commendation documentation that required special authorization to access. Rivera pulled Hawkins aside and showed her the tablet screen. Ma'am, there's a classified citation here dated 18 months ago. It references a 2,400-meter elimination that saved a pinned-down squad. Recommended for Silver Star, but downgraded to Army Commendation Medal due to classification restrictions on the mission details. The general read the citation carefully. The target was an enemy sniper positioned in elevated terrain. Adverse weather conditions. High wind. The shot was taken from an unstable firing position under direct enemy observation. Success rate for that scenario would be estimated under 5%, yet Captain Chun made the shot on her second attempt. Rivera scrolled through additional pages. 15 confirmed eliminations total across 5 deployments. 8 of those were beyond 1,500 meters. 3 exceeded 2,000 meters. Her specialty was extreme distance engagement in mountainous terrain where most snipers struggle with elevation and wind calculations. Hawkins closed the file and looked toward where Mason stood near the firing line. Staff Sergeant Mason claimed he reviewed her qualifications before making his assignment decision. Which page did he actually read? Rivera pulled up the personnel access logs. Only the first page was opened in his session, ma'am. Basic information and initial training dates from 6 years ago. He never accessed her deployment records or combat citations. The range crew returned and delivered their verification report. All measurements confirmed. 6 impacts at 3,000 meters. 2 additional impacts at shorter ranges during calibration. Total of 8 hits out of 10 shots, with 6 at the qualification distance. The photographic evidence was clear and detailed. One technician added that the target clustering was the tightest he had seen at any extreme distance in 12 years of range maintenance. Hawkins accepted the report and signed the verification document. She turned to Mason, who had been listening to the crew's findings with visible tension. Staff Sergeant, walk me through your assignment process for Captain Chun. Start with when you received her orders. Mason explained that he had reviewed her file upon arrival and determined she needed preparation time before joining the advanced course. Her basic qualifications were solid, but did not indicate readiness for the facility's specialized training environment. He had assigned her to familiarization tasks to help her understand the facility's standards and expectations. The general's expression remained neutral. Did you review her complete file, or just a summary page? Mason hesitated before responding. I reviewed the relevant qualification information, ma'am. The first page contained her basic certifications and training completion dates. Hawkins handed him the tablet with Rivera's file still open. Read page 5, the classified citation. Mason read in silence, his face showing the progression from confusion to recognition to understanding. The citation described capabilities far beyond anything the facility's advanced course taught. The combat eliminations listed in the report exceeded the performance of every instructor on staff. The captain he had assigned to clean weapons possessed skills that placed her among the top snipers in the Army. The general waited until Mason finished reading. You assigned someone with this background to equipment maintenance. For 6 weeks. Can you explain that decision? Mason attempted to construct a response about team integration and preparation time, but the words sounded hollow even as he spoke them. The file made clear that no preparation was needed. Captain Chun had been ready for advanced training the day she arrived. More than ready. She could have been instructing the course rather than taking it. Rivera stepped forward with his clipboard. General, I raised concerns about this assignment 3 weeks ago during my inspection. Staff Sergeant Mason assured me she was being scheduled appropriately. Hawkins turned back to Mason. You told Lieutenant Colonel Rivera she needed preparation time, but you never read the file that would have shown she needed no such thing. What was your actual reasoning for the assignment decision? The question hung in the desert air, while Mason searched for an explanation that would not expose his bias. He had assumed. He had judged based on surface observation rather than documented capability. He had seen a female officer and made decisions about her readiness without reviewing the evidence that contradicted his assumptions. Mason's silence provided its own answer. Hawkins nodded as though confirming something she had already suspected. The general closed the file on the tablet and handed it back to Rivera. Lieutenant Colonel, I want a complete audit of Staff Sergeant Mason's assignment decisions for the past 18 months. Every personnel, finally processed every training course assignment he made. I want to know if this was an isolated incident or part of a pattern. Rivera made notes on his clipboard. Yes, ma'am. I'll initiate the review immediately. Hawkins walked to where Maya stood, waiting near the equipment table. The captain had remained professionally distant during the verification process, neither celebrating her achievement nor reacting to the discussions about her assignment. The general spoke quietly enough that only Maya could hear. Captain Chun, you demonstrated today that you're operating at a level this facility rarely sees. 6 hits at 3,000 meters is extraordinary by any standard. The fact that you've been cleaning equipment instead of training is a failure of leadership, not a reflection of your capability. Maya acknowledged the statement without elaboration. Thank you, ma'am. Hawkins continued. I'm going to recommend your immediate transfer to Special Operations Sniper School. That's where shooters with your skills belong. But first, we need to address what happened here. Lieutenant Colonel Rivera will be conducting an investigation into the assignment practices at this facility. You may be asked to provide testimony. Understood, ma'am. I'll cooperate fully with any investigation. The general returned to the observation tower where Mason and Rivera waited. The afternoon had revealed more than just exceptional marksmanship. It had exposed a systematic failure in how talent was evaluated and assigned. The implications extended beyond one misassigned officer to question how many others might have been similarly overlooked or dismissed based on assumptions rather than evidence. Hawkins collected her briefing materials and prepared to depart. Her helicopter would arrive within the hour to return her to headquarters. Before leaving, she issued one final instruction to Rivera. Captain Chun is not to be assigned any maintenance duties effective immediately. Put her in the advanced course starting tomorrow. And give me a full report on the assignment audit within 2 weeks. I want names, dates, and patterns. All of it. Rivera acknowledged the order and watched the general leave. Mason remained standing near the tower, the tablet with Maya's file still in his hand. The 6 impact points at 3,000 meters would be measured and photographed for the official record. But the real documentation was in the file he had never bothered to read completely. The evidence of capability he had dismissed without examination, the proof that assumption was a poor substitute for verification. Word traveled faster than official channels. By evening formation, every student in the advanced course knew about the 3,000-meter demonstration. Collins found Williams in the barracks common area and described what he had witnessed. 6 hits out of 10. Center mass clustering. A captain they had barely noticed was performing at a level that exceeded their instructors. Williams pulled up the range records on his phone. The facility database had already been updated with Maya's verified results. The previous record of 2,650 meters had stood for 3 years. Maya had exceeded it by 350 meters and done so with repeatable consistency. The notation in the database included a comment from the range safety officer. Most accurate extreme distance shooting ever recorded at this facility. The 2 men discussed the implications in quiet tones. Both had been present when Maya arrived 6 weeks earlier. Both had seen her assigned to basic training and maintenance tasks. Neither had questioned the decision at the time, accepting Mason's judgment about preparation and team integration. Now those decisions appeared less like professional assessment and more like systematic dismissal. Park joined the conversation and added her perspective. She had been the only woman in the advanced course before Maya's arrival and had faced her own challenges with instructor attitudes. Nothing as overt as maintenance assignments, but subtle resistance in the form of extra scrutiny and higher performance expectations. She had learned to exceed every standard by enough margin that objections became impossible. Social media posts began appearing from soldiers who had been present during the demonstration. One video clip showed Maya's firing position, though the actual shots were not visible. Another post featured photographs of the target array with 6 clear impact points. Someone had uploaded a comparison image showing the target clustering achieved by the previous record holder alongside Maya's results. The difference was stark. A military interest forum picked up the story within hours. Commoners debated the authenticity of the achievement until multiple witnesses confirmed the details. Discussion threads analyzed the ballistic requirements for 3,000-meter shots and calculated the difficulty factors. Wind drift alone at that distance could measure in yards. Bullet drop exceeded 50 feet. The Coriolis effect became measurable. Success required not just equipment and training, but an intuitive understanding of physics that few shooters ever developed. By 2,200 hours, the story had reached other Army installations. Training commands at Fort Benning and Fort Campbell received inquiry calls asking for verification. A reporter from Army Times contacted the Public Affairs Office requesting an interview with the shooter. Special Operations Command placed a call to Rivera's office before normal business hours had even ended. The SOCOM liaison identified himself and explained his purpose. "We received reports about an extreme distance demonstration at your facility. A Captain Maya Chun. We'd like to review her complete file and discuss potential assignment opportunities." Rivera provided the basic information and arranged to forward the documentation through secure channels. The liaison mentioned that SOCOM maintained specialized sniper programs that operated at the capability level Maya had demonstrated. If she was interested and qualified, there were positions available that would utilize her skills more appropriately than a standard training facility could offer. Mason spent the evening in his office reviewing personnel files he should have read thoroughly months earlier. The audit Hawkins had ordered would examine 18 months of his assignment decisions. He pulled files systematically, starting with the most recent arrivals. The pattern emerged within the first dozen records. 3 female snipers had arrived with advanced qualifications over the past year. All 3 had been assigned to basic or intermediate training despite credentials that warranted immediate placement in advanced courses. One had combat experience similar to Maya's. Another held instructor certifications from a different installation. The third had completed specialized urban sniper training. Mason had processed all 3 into entry-level positions. Male arrivals with similar or lesser qualifications had been placed directly into advanced training. The comparison was undeniable. Mason had applied different standards based on gender rather than capability. Some decisions had been conscious. Others had been automatic assumptions he had not examined. The result was the same regardless of intent. His supervisor would review these files. The Inspector General would review them. General Hawkins would review them. The documentation told a story that Mason could not explain away with references to team cohesion or preparation requirements. He had systematically undervalued qualified personnel based on his personal biases, and the evidence was recorded in assignment logs and training rosters that could not be altered or denied. In her temporary quarters, Maya received a message from her previous unit commander. News of the demonstration had reached her old reconnaissance team, and several of her former teammates had sent congratulations. One message included a comment that she was finally getting recognition for skills they had relied on during multiple deployments. Another mentioned that her 2,400-meter shot in Khyner Province had become legendary in their unit, though the classified nature of the mission had kept it from wider recognition. She responded to each message briefly, thanking them for their support. The demonstration had not been about vindication or proving anyone wrong. It had been about performing a task she knew she could accomplish when given the opportunity. The fact that opportunity had been delayed for 6 weeks was disappointing but not surprising. She had encountered similar resistance before and had learned that performance eventually overcame assumption. The next morning brought official actions. Rivera convened a meeting with his senior staff to discuss the audit findings and new assignment protocols. Mason was present but silent while the lieutenant colonel outlined the scope of the investigation. Every personnel assignment decision for the past 18 months would be reviewed. Every file would be examined completely. Any evidence of discriminatory placement would be documented and addressed. 3 additional officers joined the review team. They divided the personnel files among themselves and began systematic examination. By mid-morning, they had identified 4 cases that paralleled Maya's situation. Qualified personnel assigned below their capability level. Inadequate file review. Decisions that appeared influenced by demographic factors rather than professional credentials. One of the reviewing officers discovered that formal complaints had been filed in 2 of these cases. The complaints had been routed to Mason for resolution, and he had responded with justifications about training progression and team dynamics. Neither complaint had been elevated to higher authority. Both affected personnel had eventually transferred to other installations after months of unsuitable assignments. Rivera compiled the preliminary findings into a report for General Hawkins. The pattern was clear and documented. Mason's assignment decisions showed consistent bias that had affected multiple personnel and degraded the facility's training effectiveness. Qualified shooters had been underutilized. Courses had been populated with less capable students, while more skilled personnel cleaned equipment. The facility's overall performance had suffered as a result. At 1300 hours, Rivera called Mason to his office. The lieutenant colonel presented the audit findings with professional detachment. For confirmed cases of discriminatory assignment, 2 formal complaints that were improperly handled, multiple instances of inadequate file review. The evidence supported removal from current position and formal counseling at minimum. Mason accepted the findings without attempting defense. The documentation was conclusive. His decisions had violated basic principles of professional evaluation and personnel management. Whether the bias had been conscious or unconscious was irrelevant to the outcome. The damage was done and recorded. Rivera informed him that he was being placed on administrative leave pending the completion of the investigation. An interim range chief would assume his duties immediately. Mason would be reassigned to administrative functions away from training operations. The final disposition would be determined after General Hawkins reviewed the complete audit report. By evening, Maya had been officially enrolled in the advanced course. Her name appeared on the roster alongside Collins, Williams, Park, and 8 other students. The course schedule showed training at 1,500 meters, 2,000 meters, and specialized techniques for extreme distance engagements. She would begin the following morning. Collins approached her in the dining facility that night. He spoke quietly, aware that others were watching. "I wanted to apologize. When you first arrived, I didn't take you seriously. None of us did. We assumed Mason knew what he was doing with your assignment. Yesterday proved how wrong we were." Maya acknowledged the apology with a nod. The course would provide better opportunities to work together than maintenance duties had. Collins agreed and mentioned that several students wanted to learn her techniques for reading wind at extreme distances. The 3,000-meter shots had demonstrated mastery that exceeded what their current instruction covered. The sun set over Fort Bragg while the facility adjusted to new realities. A record that had seemed impossible was now documented and verified. A pattern of bias that had operated quietly for months was now exposed and being addressed. And a captain who should have been training from day one was finally positioned to operate at her actual capability level. The targets downrange waited for tomorrow's session, unaware that the shooter approaching them had already proven what she could do when distance and doubt were no longer obstacles. Training Command Headquarters received Rivera's preliminary audit report at 0800 on Wednesday morning. A colonel on the Personnel Review Board read through the findings twice before forwarding them to the commanding general. By 1000 hours, orders had been issued for a formal inspector general investigation covering not just Fort Bragg, but all Army sniper training facilities. The IG team arrived Thursday afternoon. 3 officers with credentials in equal opportunity compliance and personnel management. They established operations in a conference room and requested access to all assignment records, training rosters, and personnel files dating back 2 years. Their scope extended beyond Mason's decisions to examine whether similar patterns existed elsewhere in the training command structure. The lead investigator, a lieutenant colonel named Stevens, began with structured interviews. Maya was scheduled first. She arrived at the conference room at 1400 hours and provided a factual account of her experience. Arrival on September 15th. Assignment to basic training despite advanced qualifications. Multiple requests for transfer to appropriate course level. Delayed placement until November 7th. No range time for 6 weeks except the basic qualification and the 3,000-meter demonstration. Stevens took detailed notes. Did Staff Sergeant Mason ever explain his reasoning for these assignments? Maya recounted the justifications about team integration and preparation time. Mason had claimed the advanced course required readiness that took time to develop. He had suggested she needed to understand the facility standards before joining the elite students. None of his explanations had addressed her actual qualifications or combat experience. The investigator asked about the file review process. When you reported to the facility, did Staff Sergeant Mason discuss your deployment record or combat experience? No, ma'am. He looked at my file briefly, but only referenced my basic qualifications from initial training. He never mentioned my reconnaissance unit assignment or the specialized missions. Stevens made additional notes. How many other female personnel did you observe receiving similar treatment? Maya described the 3 women she had encountered during her 6 weeks at the facility. One was assigned to administrative duties despite holding instructor certifications. Another worked in supply management despite combat deployment experience. A third had been placed in intermediate training when her file showed advanced course completion at a different installation. None were assigned at their documented capability level. The interviews continued through Friday. Collins testified about observing Maya's skills being dismissed. Park described her own experiences with differential treatment. Williams confirmed that male arrivals with equivalent qualifications had been placed directly into advanced courses, while female arrivals faced additional scrutiny and lower placements. Rivera provided documentation of his previous attempts to address the issue. His inspection report from 3 weeks earlier had noted concerns about Maya's assignment. He had questioned Mason directly and received assurances that appropriate scheduling was being followed. The lieutenant colonel admitted he should have pressed harder when those assurances proved inadequate. Mason's interview lasted 3 hours. Stevens walked him through each discriminatory assignment decision, asking him to explain his reasoning. The range instructor attempted to justify his choices with references to training progression and team cohesion, but when pressed for specific evidence supporting those justifications, he could provide none. His file reviews had been cursory. His assignment decisions had followed patterns that correlated with gender rather than capability. His handling of complaints had been dismissive rather than thorough. By Monday morning, Stevens had compiled sufficient evidence to support formal findings. The investigation documented 12 instances of discriminatory assignment over 18 months. 4 formal complaints had been filed and improperly handled. Multiple qualified personnel had been systematically underutilized based on demographic factors rather than professional credentials. The facility's training effectiveness had been compromised as a result. The IG team presented their findings to the facility commander in a closed session. The evidence was comprehensive and damning. Immediate corrective actions were required. The commander listened to the presentation and acknowledged the severity of the situation. This represented not just individual bias, but institutional failure to catch and correct that bias through proper oversight. Stevens recommended Mason's immediate removal from all training responsibilities. His supervisor, who had failed to detect the pattern during routine reviews, also required counseling and closer oversight. The facility needed to implement blind evaluation procedures for all incoming personnel. Assignment decisions should be based on demonstrated capability rather than instructor judgment influenced by demographic factors. The commander accepted the recommendations and added his own. All affected personnel would be contacted and offered opportunities to return for appropriate training placement. A formal apology would be issued to each individual. The facility would adopt the blind assessment protocol within 30 days. Mandatory bias training would be required for all staff with assignment authority. General Hawkins received the complete IG report Tuesday morning. She read it in her Pentagon office while her aide waited for instructions. The findings confirmed what the 3,000-meter demonstration had suggested. Systematic bias had operated unchecked for 18 months, affecting careers and degrading readiness. The failure extended beyond one instructor to include supervision and oversight systems that should have caught the problem earlier. Hawkins drafted a memorandum for distribution to all training commands. The Fort Bragg situation would serve as a case study in how bias damages operational effectiveness. Every installation would review their assignment practices using the blind evaluation protocols developed by the IG team. Quarterly audits would verify compliance. Any future evidence of discriminatory placement would result in immediate removal from training responsibilities. The general also drafted a second document, this one addressed to Special Operations Command. Captain Maya-chan had demonstrated skills that warranted immediate consideration for specialized programs. Her combat record supported her capability at extreme distances. Her performance under pressure showed mental resilience. SOCOM should evaluate her for assignment to units that operated at her level rather than wasting her talents on standard courses she had already mastered. By Wednesday afternoon, official actions were finalized. Mason received orders reassigning him to a logistics battalion administrative position. His personnel file would include documentation of the discriminatory pattern and the IG findings. He would not work in training operations again. His supervisor received a formal letter of reprimand and was removed from personnel assignment authority pending completion of remedial training. The facility commander assembled all staff and students for a mandatory formation. He read a prepared statement acknowledging institutional failure in personnel management. The facility had failed to provide equal opportunity for all qualified soldiers. Multiple individuals have been harmed by biased assignment decisions. Systemic changes were being implemented to prevent recurrence. The commander specifically addressed Maya's case without naming her. A highly qualified officer was assigned to maintenance duties for 6 weeks based on inadequate file review and biased assumptions. That officer then demonstrated capability that exceeded facility records and proved the assignment decisions were fundamentally flawed. This failure damaged not only that officer's development, but also the facility's training effectiveness. We lost 6 weeks of potential instruction from someone who could have elevated the entire program. After the formation dismissed, Rivera approached Maya with new orders. Special Operations Command had requested her complete file and wanted to schedule an interview. They were offering immediate placement in their advanced sniper school, a 6-month program that fed directly into specialized operational units. The course operated at extreme distances as standard procedure rather than exceptional achievement. Maya reviewed the orders and accepted them. The SOCOM program represented the kind of assignment her skills warranted. Rivera added that General Hawkins had personally endorsed the recommendation and specified that Maya should not be delayed by administrative processing. Transfer orders would be effective within 2 weeks. That afternoon, Collins requested permission to attend one of Maya's training sessions. Several other students made similar requests. They wanted to observe her wind reading techniques and learn her approach to extreme distance calculations. Rivera approved the sessions and scheduled them as optional workshops during evening hours. 30 students attended the first workshop. Maya set up at the 2,000-meter range and demonstrated her process for analyzing environmental conditions. She explained how to read mirage patterns at multiple distances simultaneously. She showed them techniques for calculating spin drift and Coriolis effect without relying entirely on ballistic computers. Most importantly, she taught them to trust their observations when conditions fell outside standard parameters. Williams took extensive notes and asked detailed questions. Park recorded portions of the session on her phone for later review. Collins mentioned that Maya's teaching was clearer and more practical than what they had received from previous instructors. She explained the principles behind the calculations rather than just providing formulas to memorize. The facility's training effectiveness improved measurably within days. Students who attended Maya's workshops showed better performance at long distances. Their wind calls became more accurate. Their first shot hit probability increased. They began asking questions about environmental factors they had previously ignored. The 6 weeks of wasted potential were being partially recovered through voluntary instruction that should have been part of the program from Maya's arrival. By week's end, the facility had processed Maya's transfer orders and scheduled her departure for the following Monday. SOCM had confirmed her enrollment in their specialized program starting the 1st of next month. She would report to an undisclosed training location for assessment and integration into their advanced curriculum. The course syllabus included extreme distance engagements as routine training rather than exceptional demonstrations. On her final day at Fort Bragg, Rivera presented Maya with official documentation of her facility record: 3,000 meters, 6 hits out of 10 attempts. The certificate was signed by General Hawkins and included notation that this represented the longest confirmed distance shots in facility history. The achievement would be permanently recorded on the range qualification board. Rivera added his personal acknowledgement. "Captain, you handled this situation with more professionalism than it deserved. You could have filed complaints or demanded immediate action, but instead you focused on performing your duties regardless of how inappropriate those duties were. That discipline and focus are exactly what Special Operations needs." Maya accepted the recognition and prepared for her departure. The facility that had assigned her to clean weapons was now using her as an example of capability-based evaluation. The instructor who had dismissed her qualifications was reassigned to logistics, and the general who had witnessed her achievement was implementing reforms across the entire training command. The 3,000-meter shots had proven more than marksmanship. They had demonstrated what happened when performance finally overcame assumption. The formal hearing convened at Training Command Headquarters on the first Tuesday of November. A panel of 3 senior officers assembled to review the investigation findings and determine final consequences for those involved. The proceedings were closed to general attendance, but transcripts would become part of the official record accessible to affected personnel and oversight authorities. Mason sat at a small table facing the panel. His service record stretched back 15 years and included multiple commendations for training excellence. Those achievements now appeared alongside documented evidence of systematic bias that had compromised his professional judgment. The contrast between past performance and recent failures made the hearing more consequential than a simple disciplinary action. The panel chair, a full colonel with personnel management expertise, opened the proceedings by summarizing the Inspector General findings. 12 instances of discriminatory assignment decisions over 18 months. For formal complaints improperly handled. Inadequate file reviews resulting in qualified personnel being systematically underutilized. Patterns showed correlation between demographic factors and assignment outcomes that could not be explained by legitimate training considerations. Mason's defense consisted primarily of acknowledging errors in judgment, while attempting to contextualize them within training management complexities. He argued that team cohesion and progression pacing were legitimate concerns that sometimes required delaying advanced placements even for qualified personnel. The panel pressed him to explain why those concerns applied differently based on gender when candidates had equivalent qualifications. The range instructor struggled to provide satisfactory answers. His explanations referenced subjective assessments about readiness and integration potential, but when asked to identify objective criteria supporting those assessments, he could not. The panel noted that male arrivals with identical or lesser qualifications had not faced similar delays or been assigned to maintenance duties regardless of any team cohesion concerns. Rivera testified about his attempts to intervene. His quarterly inspection had identified concerns about Maya's assignment 3 weeks before the 3,000-meter demonstration. Mason had provided assurances that appropriate scheduling was being followed. The lieutenant colonel acknowledged he should have elevated the issue immediately rather than accepting those assurances, but noted that organizational culture had not encouraged questioning senior instructor judgments about training assignments. The panel asked Rivera about broader facility oversight. Had anyone else noticed the pattern before the IG investigation? The lieutenant colonel admitted that several junior instructors had privately expressed concerns about assignment disparities, but none had filed formal complaints or brought the issue to command attention. The facility operated with significant deference to range instructor expertise, and that deference had created blind spots in the oversight process. Park provided testimony about her own experience as the only woman in the advanced course before Maya's arrival. She described subtle differential treatment, including heightened scrutiny of her performance and assumptions that her successes resulted from favorable conditions rather than skill. Nothing as overt as maintenance assignments, but a persistent pattern of having to prove herself repeatedly while male students with equivalent performance were assumed competent. The panel questioned her about whether she had reported these concerns. Park explained that she had not filed formal complaints because the treatment, while frustrating, had not risen to the level of obvious discrimination. She had focused on exceeding every standard by enough margin that objections became impossible. Her strategy had been performance-based self-advocacy rather than administrative grievance. Williams testified about observing assignment decisions over his time at the facility. He confirmed that male arrivals consistently received more favorable initial placements than female arrivals with similar credentials. The pattern had been visible to students, but was assumed to reflect instructor expertise in evaluating readiness. The 3,000-meter demonstration had forced reconsideration of those assumptions. Mason's supervisor, a master sergeant named Patterson, faced his own accountability hearing. He had conducted quarterly reviews of training operations and signed off on assignment decisions without detecting the discriminatory pattern. The panel examined his oversight procedures and found them inadequate. Patterson had relied on Mason's representations rather than independently verifying file reviews and assignment justifications. Patterson defended his approach by noting that training operations required trusting instructor expertise and not micromanaging every assignment decision. The panel responded that trust required verification, especially when patterns suggested bias. A supervisor's responsibility included ensuring fair treatment, not simply accepting senior instructors' judgments without scrutiny. By afternoon, the hearings concluded and the panel began deliberations. They reviewed documented evidence, witness testimony, and applicable regulations. The findings were clear. Mason's decisions had violated Army equal opportunity policies and damaged both individual careers and organizational effectiveness. Patterson's supervision had failed to detect or correct the problem despite multiple opportunities to do so. The panel announced their determinations the following morning. Mason would receive a formal letter of reprimand that would become part of his permanent record. He was removed from all training responsibilities and reassigned to administrative logistics duties. His eligibility for future promotion was suspended pending completion of mandatory remedial training in personnel management and equal opportunity compliance. The reassignment would be effective immediately. Patterson received a written counseling statement documenting his oversight failures. He was removed from supervisory authority over training assignments and required to complete enhanced oversight training. His next performance evaluation would reflect the deficiencies identified during the hearing. Future advancement would depend on demonstrated improvement in supervision and accountability. The facility commander issued a formal apology to all affected personnel. Letters were drafted and sent to each of the 12 individuals identified in the IG investigation. The commander acknowledged that the facility had failed to provide equal opportunity and that careers had been negatively impacted by discriminatory practices. Each letter included an offer to return for appropriate training placement, with all administrative barriers removed. 3 of the affected personnel accepted the return offers. 2 had already transferred to other installations and were performing well in appropriate assignments. 1 had left active duty after her contract ended, citing frustration with institutional bias as a contributing factor to her departure decision. The facility's failures had not just delayed training, but had driven qualified soldiers away from service entirely. General Hawkins reviewed the hearing outcomes and approved the panel's recommendations. She added a requirement that Mason complete a reassessment process before any future consideration for training roles. Even in logistics, his interactions with personnel would be monitored to ensure compliance with equal opportunity standards. The message was clear: discrimination had consequences that extended beyond immediate reassignment. The general also directed Training Command to implement quarterly bias audits at all facilities. Assignment patterns would be analyzed statistically to detect disparities correlating with demographic factors. Any concerning patterns would trigger immediate review. Instructors with assignment authority would complete annual training on recognizing and preventing bias in professional judgments. Rivera received recognition for his role in exposing the problems despite organizational pressure to accept surface explanations. He was promoted to facility deputy commander and given responsibility for implementing the new oversight protocols. His willingness to question authority and elevate concerns, even belatedly, demonstrated leadership that the facility needed going forward. By week's end, the facility had published updated assignment procedures requiring blind evaluation of all incoming personnel. Files would be reviewed by a panel rather than a single instructor. Demographic information would be redacted during initial capability assessment. Assignment recommendations would require documentation of specific qualification gaps if placement below credential level was proposed. The new system created accountability and transparency that previous procedures had lacked. Mason cleaned out his office and reported to his new logistics assignment. The work involved tracking equipment inventories and managing supply requisitions. No personnel supervisión. No training authority. No opportunity to make judgments about who was ready for advanced development. His 15-year career in sniper instruction had ended not with retirement ceremony, but with administrative exile resulting from biases he had failed to recognize or control. The 3,000-meter target array remained standing at the extreme range. The 6 impact points from Maya's demonstration were photographed and documented in the facility record book. A permanent plaque was commissioned to recognize the achievement. The inscription would read, Captain Maya Chun, November 2024, 3,000 meters, 6 hits, facility record. The plaque would be mounted in the range office where every student and instructor would see it daily. Collins approached the plaque installation team while they worked. He studied the inscription and the accompanying photograph showing the target impacts. The clustering was remarkable even in the still image. He remembered his initial skepticism when Maya had requested to attempt the qualification. He remembered assuming she would miss all 10 shots. The plaque represented not just a record, but a lesson about the cost of assumption. Park stood beside him and read the inscription. This should have been set months ago. She should have been training with us from day one instead of proving herself with an impossible shot. Collins agreed. The facility had wasted 6 weeks of potential instruction from someone who could have elevated their entire program. They had lost training value because one instructor could not see past his biases to evaluate actual capability. The cost was measured not just in Maya's delayed development, but in missed opportunities for every student who could have learned from her expertise. The sun set over Fort Bragg while the facility continued its transformation. New protocols were being implemented. Discriminatory practices were being rooted out. And a plaque commemorating an extraordinary achievement was being mounted as a permanent reminder that capability exists independent of assumption, waiting only for opportunity to demonstrate what bias had tried to deny. The Special Operations Command Review Board convened in a secure conference room at the Pentagon on a Thursday morning in mid-November. 3 general officers examined Maya's complete military file while she waited in an adjacent room. Her deployment records, combat citations, training certifications, and the Fort Bragg demonstration documentation were spread across the table in organized stacks. A 3-star general who chaired the board read through the classified citation from her Afghanistan deployment. The 2,400-meter elimination under adverse conditions had saved a pinned-down squad. The after-action report described challenging terrain, high winds, and an unstable firing position. Maya had made the shot on her second attempt when most snipers would not have attempted it at all. The squad leader's statement recommended her for Silver Star, though classification restrictions had resulted in downgrade to Army Commendation Medal. The board discussed her performance metrics systematically. 15 confirmed eliminations over 5 deployments. 8 beyond 1,500 meters. 3 exceeding 2,000 meters. Success rate at extreme distances exceeded 90% when conditions permitted the shot. Her reconnaissance unit commander's evaluation described her as the most capable long-range shooter he had encountered in 20 years of special operations service. The Fort Bragg demonstration added contemporary evidence to the historical record. 6 hits at 3,000 meters represented capability that belonged in specialized programs rather than standard training facilities. The board noted that SOCOM sniper courses operated routinely at distances Maya had proven she could handle. Her skills matched the operational requirements for units that conducted precision elimination missions in challenging environments. The chairman called Maya into the conference room at 1000 hours. She entered and stood at attention until directed to sit. The 3 generals faced her across the table, their expressions professionally neutral. The chairman explained that they had reviewed her complete record and wanted to discuss assignment options available through Special Operations Command. Maya acknowledged and waited for specific questions. The chairman asked about her experience with extreme distance shooting in operational contexts. She described missions in Afghanistan's mountainous regions where targets often appeared at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. The terrain and enemy tactics required capabilities beyond what standard sniper training provided. Her unit had developed specialized techniques for those conditions, and she had become their primary long-range specialist. A second general asked about her training background. Maya detailed her progression through Army Sniper School, advanced marksmanship courses, and specialized instruction received during reconnaissance unit assignment. She had also trained with Marine Corps Scout snipers during a joint operation and learned additional techniques for extreme distance wind reading. Her education combined formal programs with practical experience gained across multiple combat environments. The third general raised the Fort Bragg situation. The board had read the Inspector General report and understood the discriminatory assignment pattern. How had she maintained capability during 6 weeks of maintenance duties with no range access? Maya explained her personal training regimen: physical conditioning, dry fire practice, ballistic calculations, and mental rehearsal of wind reading techniques. She had also studied range conditions during her maintenance assignments, observing how environmental factors affected other shooters' performance. The forced break from shooting had actually provided opportunity to analyze the facility's extreme range in detail before attempting it herself. The chairman appreciated that perspective. The board's assessment was that Maya's skills and experience warranted immediate placement in their advanced sniper program. The course ran 6 months and fed directly into specialized operational units that conducted precision missions at extended ranges. Graduates typically received assignments to classified programs operating in denied areas where conventional forces could not perform required eliminations. The program started in January. Maya would spend December completing administrative processing and pre-course requirements. The training location was classified, but would be disclosed after her security clearances updated. She would be joining a class of 12 students, all with extensive combat experience and specialized skills. The course failure rate exceeded 40% because standards were uncompromising. Maya accepted the assignment without hesitation. The SOCOM program represented exactly the kind of opportunity her capabilities warranted. The chairman added that General Hawkins had personally endorsed the transfer and requested expedited processing. The Fort Bragg incident had demonstrated the cost of underutilizing qualified personnel, and SOCOM intended to avoid similar mistakes. Transfer orders were issued that afternoon. Maya received notification while still at the Pentagon. She would depart Fort Bragg within 1 week and report to SOCOM headquarters for in-processing. Her security clearance would be elevated to handle the classified mission profiles she would encounter. Her personnel file would be flagged for specialized assignment tracking. By the following Tuesday, Maya had completed her departure processing from Fort Bragg. Rivera met with her privately to discuss the facility changes resulting from her case. The blind evaluation protocols were being adopted Army-wide. Training Command had identified 8 other installations with concerning assignment patterns. Reforms were spreading through the entire sniper training enterprise because one demonstration had exposed systematic problems. Rivera thanked her for the professionalism she had maintained throughout the situation. Lesser soldiers might have become bitter or confrontational. Maya had focused on performing her duties regardless of how inappropriate those duties were. That discipline reflected the kind of character SOCM needed in their specialized programs. Collins organized a small departure gathering at the advanced range. 15 students attended, representing everyone who had participated in Maya's voluntary workshops. They presented her with a custom range coin engraved with her facility record. 3,000 meters. 6 hits. The coin included notation that she had elevated their entire program through her instruction and example. Williams mentioned that their long-range performance had improved measurably since Maya's workshops. First shot hit probability at 2,000 meters had increased 15% across the student body. The techniques she taught about reading mirage patterns and calculating environmental effects were now being incorporated into the facility's formal curriculum. Her influence would continue after her departure. Park spoke privately with Maya before she left. As the only other woman who had navigated the facility's challenges, Park understood what the 6-week delay had cost. She thanked Maya for forcing the institutional reckoning that would benefit future female soldiers. The reforms were necessary, but would not have happened without Maya's demonstration proving the assignment decisions were indefensible. Maya departed Fort Bragg on a cold December morning, the same front gate where she had arrived in September. The guard who processed her departure credentials recognized her name from the facility record announcements. He mentioned that his daughter was considering Army sniper training and asked if Maya thought the opportunities were genuine now. Maya confirmed that the reforms were real and that capability-based evaluation would determine assignments going forward. The drive from Fort Bragg took her past the ranges where she had cleaned equipment, sorted ammunition, and maintained weapons. Past the extreme range where 6 shots at 3,000 meters had transformed institutional failures into accountability and reform. Past the advanced course where she should have trained from day one, but instead had proven her skills after weeks of unnecessary delay. By mid-December, Maya had completed her SOCM processing and received her classified training location assignment. The facility was remote and secure, designed for students who would conduct sensitive missions requiring complete operational security. She arrived to find 11 other students already present, each with impressive credentials and combat experience. The course cadre treated her as a peer from the first day. No questions about preparation time. No assumptions about readiness. They had reviewed her file completely and understood exactly what she brought to the program. Her Fort Bragg record was known among the instructors, and several mentioned they were curious to see her techniques for extreme distance wind reading. The first week involved assessment and team building. Students demonstrated their capabilities across multiple shooting disciplines. Maya's performance at extended ranges confirmed what her file suggested. She consistently connected at distances where other students struggled. Her wind calls were precise, even in variable conditions. The instructors noted her teaching ability when other students asked questions about her methods. By week 2, Maya had fully integrated into the program. The course operated at a level that matched her abilities. Targets routinely appeared at 2,000 meters and beyond. Environmental conditions were deliberately challenging. Scenarios replicated operational stress that separated capable shooters from exceptional ones. This was the environment where she belonged, performing at her actual capability rather than being restricted to basic tasks that wasted her skills. The students respected each other based on demonstrated performance. Gender was irrelevant in a program where everyone had proven themselves through combat deployments and specialized operations. Maya was evaluated on the same standards as her classmates, and she met or exceeded those standards consistently. Her instructors provided feedback focused on advancement rather than remediation. They identified minor areas for refinement in her urban shooting techniques and offered advanced instruction that built on her existing expertise. The relationship was professional development rather than basic training. This was what assignment should have been at Fort Bragg from day one. By Christmas, Maya had established herself as one of the top students in the course. Her extreme distance capabilities were exceptional even among this elite group. Her ability to teach and share techniques elevated the entire class. The cadre began discussing potential unit assignments after graduation, identifying specialized programs that could utilize her particular combination of long-range precision and combat experience. On New Year's Eve, Maya received a message from General Hawkins. The facility reforms were progressing across all Army training installations. Quarterly audits had identified and corrected additional cases of biased assignments. The blind evaluation protocols were producing measurably better training outcomes. The system was improving because one demonstration had proven that performance mattered more than assumption. The general added a personal note. Maya's 3,000-meter shots had accomplished more than breaking a facility record. They had broken assumptions that constrained opportunity and diminished readiness. SOCOM was fortunate to have her in their program, and the Army was better for the reforms her case had forced into existence. 6 months of intensive training concluded on a humid morning in late June. Maya stood with 11 other graduates in a secure auditorium as the SOCOM commander presented course completion certificates. The ceremony was closed to outside attendance due to the classified nature of the program and the operational assignments that would follow. Family members watched via secured video link from a separate location. The commander addressed the graduates with professional directness. This program maintains a failure rate exceeding 40% because we accept nothing less than operational excellence. You 12 represent the successful completion of the most demanding sniper training the military offers. Your assignments will place you in situations where failure means mission compromise and potentially American casualties. We trust you because you have proven your capability under conditions that eliminated those who were not ready. Maya ranked first in her class across all evaluation metrics. Her extreme distance performance had exceeded even instructor expectations. During the final assessment, she had connected on targets at 3,200 meters in variable wind conditions, establishing a new course record. Her urban shooting scores placed her in the top 3. Her teaching ability had elevated the performance of struggling classmates during team exercises. Assignment orders were distributed individually after the ceremony. Maya received hers in a sealed envelope marked with security classifications. She was being assigned to a specialized direct action unit that conducted precision elimination missions in denied areas. The unit operated globally with minimal notice, deploying to locations where conventional forces could not perform required tasks. Her primary role would be long-range, specialist supporting operations that required eliminations beyond standard engagement distances. The unit commander, a colonel with extensive combat experience, met with Maya privately that afternoon. He had reviewed her complete record, including the Fort Bragg incident. His assessment was direct. We need shooters who can perform under pressure when conditions are not ideal. Your background suggests you handle adversity well and maintain focus regardless of circumstances. That matters more than any range score. Maya would have 2 weeks of leave before reporting to her new unit. The colonel mentioned that her first deployment would likely occur within 60 days of arrival. The operational tempo was high and the mission requirements were constant. She should use the leave time to handle personal affairs because extended absences would become routine once operations began. Meanwhile, at Fort Bragg, the facility had fully implemented its reformed assignment protocols. The blind evaluation system was processing its 3rd incoming class since Maya's departure. Every file received comprehensive review by a panel rather than a single instructor. Demographic information remained redacted during capability assessment. Assignment recommendations required documented justification if placement fell below credential level. Rivera, now serving as deputy commander, monitored the new system's effectiveness through statistical analysis. The gender disparity in advanced course assignments had disappeared completely. Female arrivals with appropriate qualifications were being placed at the same rate and level as male arrivals. No maintenance assignments for qualified snipers. No artificial delays for team integration. Capability determined placement. And the data proved the system was working. The facility had also become a model for other training installations. Rivera presented their protocols at an Army-wide training conference in May. 8 other facilities adopted the blind evaluation approach. Training Command issued guidance, making similar reforms mandatory across all sniper programs. The changes initiated by Maya's case were now standard practice throughout the enterprise. Mason remained in his logistics assignment, processing supply requisitions and managing equipment inventories. His personnel file contained the permanent documentation of discriminatory practices and the formal reprimand from a hearing. 2 promotion boards had reviewed his record since the incident. Both had passed him over for advancement. His career had effectively plateaued at his current rank with limited prospects for future progression. He occasionally saw reports about the facility's improved training outcomes. The advanced course completion rate had increased by 12% since implementing blind evaluation. Student performance at extreme distances showed measurable improvement. The facility had produced 2 more shooters who connected at 3,000 meters, both trained using techniques Maya had introduced during her brief time there. Patterson, Mason's former supervisor, had completed his remedial training and returned to limited supervisory duties. He conducted equipment inspections and reviewed maintenance procedures, but had no authority over personnel assignments. His performance evaluation reflected the oversight failures identified during the hearing. Like Mason, his advancement prospects had been permanently damaged by the incident. The 3 personnel who had accepted return offers to Fort Bragg all completed their training successfully. 1 graduated top of her advanced course and received assignment to a Ranger battalion. Another qualified as an instructor and began teaching at a different facility. The 3rd deployed with a specialized reconnaissance unit and performed multiple successful missions. Their capabilities, properly recognized and developed, contributed to operational effectiveness that had been wasted during their initial assignments. In July, Maya deployed with her new unit on her first operational mission. The location was classified, but the environment was hostile. Her team conducted a precision elimination of a high-value target who had been operating in an area where conventional forces could not reach. Maya's shot from 2,600 meters in mountainous terrain removed the threat and allowed the team to extract without engagement. The mission demonstrated exactly why SOCOM had recruited her. Her unit commander's after-action report praised her performance under operational stress. Maya had adapted to challenging conditions quickly, provided accurate intelligence about terrain effects on ballistics, and executed the shot with confidence that came from extensive experience. The commander recommended her for accelerated advancement within the unit's specialized programs. By August, Army Training Command published a comprehensive review of assignment reform outcomes. The data covered 8 months since Fort Bragg implemented blind evaluation. The study found statistically significant improvements in training efficiency, student performance, and personnel satisfaction. Gender-based assignment disparities have been eliminated at facilities using the new protocols. The report concluded that capability-based evaluation produced measurably better results than instructor judgment influenced by demographic assumptions. General Hawkins included the study in her testimony before a congressional oversight committee examining military equal opportunity practices. She used Maya's case as a specific example of how bias damaged readiness. A highly qualified officer was assigned to maintenance duties for 6 weeks, then demonstrated record-breaking capability when finally given opportunity. The military had wasted potential and compromised effectiveness because one instructor could not evaluate objectively. Reforms were producing better outcomes, but the cost of the initial failure was measurable in delayed development and lost training value. The committee members asked whether similar patterns existed in other specialties. Hawkins confirmed that preliminary reviews had identified concerning disparities in aviation training, intelligence assignments, and special operations selections. The Army was expanding the blind evaluation approach to additional career fields where subjective assessments had historically influenced opportunities. The goal was ensuring talent reached appropriate utilization regardless of demographic factors that should be irrelevant to capability assessment. By September, Maya had completed 3 successful deployments with her unit. Her performance record documented 7 operational eliminations at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. Her unit commander rated her among the top specialists in the command and recommended her for advanced leadership positions. She was exactly where her skills warranted, performing at a level that standard training facilities could not accommodate. Collins reached out to Maya via encrypted message in October. He had graduated from Fort Bragg's advanced course and received orders to a sniper platoon deploying to Africa. His training had included the wind-reading techniques Maya had taught during her workshops. He wanted to thank her again for the instruction that had elevated his capabilities. Her influence extended beyond the reforms to practical skills that improved operational effectiveness for everyone she had taught. Park also contacted Maya with career news. She had been selected to attend the Army's instructor training program and would begin teaching at a different facility in November. The selection represented validation that her capabilities were finally being recognized appropriately. Park mentioned that the blind evaluation protocols had created opportunities that would not have existed under the previous system. More women were advancing through sniper programs, and performance rather than assumption was determining their progression. Williams had deployed with a Ranger regiment and was using extreme distance techniques in combat operations. His team leader credited Maya's workshops with improving their long-range effectiveness. Williams had connected on a target at 1,900 meters during a recent mission, a shot he attributed directly to what he learned from Maya's instruction about reading mirage patterns in desert environments. The Fort Bragg Facility Range office displayed Maya's record plaque prominently. New students arriving at the facility saw it during their initial orientation. Instructors used her achievement as an example when teaching extreme distance techniques. The story of her 6-week delay and subsequent demonstration had become part of the facility's culture, a reminder about the importance of objective evaluation and the cost of assumption. Rivera received promotion to full colonel and assignment as a facility commander at a different installation. His leadership during the Fort Bragg reforms had demonstrated the kind of accountability the Army needed at all levels. His new position would allow him to implement similar protocols at another location and continue spreading the capability-based evaluation approach across the training enterprise. By year's end, the reforms initiated by Maya's case had affected personnel management across multiple Army specialties. Thousands of soldiers were receiving more appropriate assignments because evaluation systems had been restructured to focus on demonstrated capability rather than subjective judgments vulnerable to bias. The 3,000-meter demonstration had accomplished far more than establishing a facility record. It had proven that talent existed independent of assumption, and that systems designed to find that talent produced measurably better outcomes than systems that relied on biased human judgment. 2 years after the 3,000-meter demonstration, Maya returned to Fort Bragg for a facility dedication ceremony. The installation was naming its extreme range in honor of soldiers who had advanced marksmanship training despite institutional barriers. Her name appeared on the dedication plaque alongside 3 other pioneering snipers whose achievements had forced reforms in evaluation practices. The ceremony took place on a clear November morning with temperatures similar to the day she had broken the facility record. General Hawkins attended as the keynote speaker, her remarks focusing on how capability-based evaluation had transformed training effectiveness across the Army. Rivera stood beside her as the current training command deputy, his promotion reflecting leadership demonstrated during the Fort Bragg reforms. Hawkins addressed the assembled students and instructors with characteristic directness. This facility once wasted 6 weeks of a highly qualified officer's time because one instructor could not see past his assumptions to evaluate actual capability. That failure cost us training value, damaged readiness, and nearly drove exceptional talent away from service. Today we recognize that failure publicly, so we never repeat it. The general described the scope of reforms implemented since Maya's demonstration. Blind evaluation protocols were now standard at 47 training facilities across multiple specialties. Assignment audits had identified and corrected 317 cases of bias placement. Training completion rates had improved by an average of 18% at facilities using capability-based assessment. The data proved that objective evaluation produced better outcomes than subjective judgment, vulnerable to demographic assumptions. Maya sat in the front row alongside Park, Collins, and Williams. All four had advanced significantly in their careers since those initial weeks at Fort Bragg. Park was now a senior instructor developing curriculum for the Army Sniper School. Collins commanded a sniper platoon with multiple successful deployments. Williams had been selected for Special Forces training and was preparing for his qualification course. After the ceremony, Rivera walked with Maya to the extreme range where her record still stood. The 6 impact points from her demonstration had been preserved as part of the facility's historical documentation. New students attempting the 3,000-meter qualification saw photographs of those impacts during their initial briefing. 2 students had matched her achievement in the past 2 years, both trained using techniques she had introduced. Rivera mentioned that the facility's reputation had transformed since implementing reforms. Other installations now sent their best students to Fort Bragg specifically because the blind evaluation system ensured fair treatment and optimal development. The facility that had once been known for wasting talent was now recognized for maximizing it. That transformation represented organizational learning from failure rather than defensive denial. Maya asked about Mason and Patterson. Rivera reported that both remained in administrative positions with limited advancement prospects. Mason had applied for retirement after his second promotion passover. Patterson was serving out his final years before mandatory retirement. Neither had returned to training responsibilities. Their careers stood as examples of how bias damaged not just those who suffered from it, but also those who perpetrated it. The range where Maya had demonstrated her capability now hosted monthly extreme distance qualifications. Students who achieved hits beyond 2,500 meters received special recognition. The facility maintained detailed records of environmental conditions, equipment configurations, and shooter techniques to build institutional knowledge about factors affecting extreme range performance. Maya's demonstration had initiated systematic study of capabilities that were previously considered too rare to merit formal analysis. Collins approached and mentioned that his platoon had successfully completed a mission the previous month using techniques learned from Maya's workshops. A target at 2,200 meters in mountainous terrain. Variable winds. Unstable firing position. His shooter had connected on the 3rd attempt using wind reading methods Maya had taught. The elimination had allowed the team to complete their objective without extended engagement. Collins credited Maya's instruction with developing capabilities his unit relied on operationally. Park discussed her instructor assignment and how blind evaluation had changed student outcomes in her courses. Female students who previously faced extra scrutiny were now evaluated identically to male students. Performance determined advancement. Capability drove assignments. The result was better trained snipers regardless of demographic factors that had once influenced subjective assessments. Park mentioned that her classes now included more women than ever before because the evaluation system actively sought talent rather than reinforcing assumptions about who belonged in the program. Williams described his Special Forces selection and how the capabilities developed at Fort Bragg had contributed to his success. The extreme distance training and mental discipline required for precision shooting translated well to the demanding selection course. He had excelled in land navigation and stress management exercises that separated successful candidates from those who were not ready. The foundation built during sniper training, including lessons from Maya's brief time at the facility, had prepared him for advancement into even more specialized programs. The afternoon included a competitive shooting event where current students demonstrated their skills at multiple distances. Maya observed from the tower where General Hawkins had watched her demonstration 2 years earlier. The students showed solid fundamentals and improving performance at extended ranges. The facility was producing better trained snipers than it had before the reforms, and the data supported that assessment. One student, a young specialist named Rodriguez, connected on targets at 2,800 meters during the demonstration. After completing his string, he approached Maya and mentioned that instructors had shown her record photographs during his initial training. Seeing what was possible at 3,000 meters had motivated him to push his own capabilities further. He asked about her techniques for reading mirage patterns in variable conditions. Maya spent 20 minutes discussing environmental analysis and ballistic calculations. Rodriguez took notes and asked detailed questions about factors affecting extreme distance shots. The interaction reminded her of similar conversations with Collins and Williams 2 years earlier. Capability could be taught when students were willing to learn and instructors were willing to teach without artificial barriers based on who the student was rather than what they could accomplish. As the sun descended toward the horizon, Maya walked the length of the extreme range one final time. The targets at 3,000 meters reflected the late afternoon light exactly as they had during her demonstration. The wind flag showed similar patterns to that November day, when 6 shots had proven what Mason's assumptions had tried to deny. The range remained challenging and unforgiving, rewarding skill while exposing deficiency regardless of who held the rifle. Rivera joined her at the firing line. The facility had learned an expensive lesson about the cost of bias. Talent existed independent of demographic factors, and systems designed to find that talent produced better outcomes than systems that relied on subjective judgment. The Army was better for the reforms, but the path to those reforms had required someone like Maya to demonstrate capability so undeniably that denial became impossible. Maya acknowledged the observation, but noted that the real change came from leaders like Rivera and Hawkins, who recognized the problem and implemented solutions. Individual demonstrations mattered less than institutional willingness to examine failures honestly and correct them systematically. The blind evaluation protocols were working because leadership had committed to making them work rather than defending the previous system. The dedication ceremony concluded with a reception where Maya connected with former instructors and current students. Conversations focused on improved training outcomes and expanding opportunities for all qualified personnel. The facility culture had shifted from one that created artificial barriers to one that actively sought and developed talent. That transformation represented organizational growth that extended beyond individual achievements to sustainable, systemic improvement. By evening, Maya prepared to return to her unit. She had completed 14 operational deployments in 2 years with consistent success. Her commander had recommended her for promotion to major and assignment to advanced leadership positions within special operations. The career trajectory matched her capabilities because she was finally operating in a system designed to maximize talent rather than constrain it based on assumptions. The drive away from Fort Bragg took her past the ranges where she had once cleaned equipment and sorted ammunition, past the facility where blind evaluation now ensured fair treatment, past the extreme range that bore her name as recognition that capability matters more than assumption. The targets remained at 3,000 meters, waiting for the next shooter ready to prove what skill could accomplish when given opportunity. The record might eventually fall, but the lesson it taught about objective evaluation would endure as long as the facility remembered the cost of the failure that made those reforms necessary. Performance had proven louder than prejudice, and systems built to recognize that truth produced outcomes that served readiness better than systems that relied on bias masquerading as professional judgment.